kind of a bit of a warm-up drill almost, just spinning to the back. The last 2 weeks before this, we were working a lot of back attacks and opening our partner up from turtle. So we'll just review one way if we end up in the front headlock position and how we could transition to the back. So I'll give you here in turtle, here you go. On Tuesday, we looked at like a slower, kind of tighter control of more like a headlock. It's pretty uncomfortable for our partner, but it's a slower way to get to the back, but I think it's a little bit safer. A couple of things I talked about on Tuesday in terms of contingencies for before I attack the neck or spin to the back are going to be that I need to make sure I break Nabil's control over my legs with his arms. So if I'm in turtle here, yeah, and he has my leg, before I do any transition, whether it's a submission or spin to the back, I usually want to make sure that I clear the control off this leg first. There are going to be some counters that you can do and some other techniques you can use even if you have the control in the leg, but for the most part, it's a lot safer to kill this control first. While I'm here as well, it's important that I don't bring both my arms under the armpits. Okay, I need one arm to be like in front of his shoulder, one arm under the armpit. Okay, if I have both my hands overhooking, one, it doesn't really stop him from posturing up, or like Nabil's just about to do, if he does like some sort of sit out move motion, he potentially is going to get behind me to my back. So to shut that down, I need one arm in front of the shoulder, one arm underneath the armpit. So again, heavy with my chest, Nabil's going to grab a leg either side, you can practice both. I'm going to sprawl my hip. The side that he's grabbing, you might not have the space to be able to wedge this arm in front, so I usually like to go this arm underneath the armpit. That way it's also going to stop him from transitioning this arm to like a back control. Okay, so I'm acting this arm as like a wizard. This hand then is going to push Nabil's head down to the floor. I really like to keep his forehead down so that way it's hard for him to posture up and pick the leg up in the air. So now from here I'm just going to keep sprawling until I kill the control. Once I kill the control, I'm going to step my knee to the outside of his tricep. That way I know that this leg can no longer reach for my leg. Even if he grabs the other leg, it's going to be a little bit different and not as bad of a scenario. But I break the control and then dip my knee to the other side of his tricep. At the same time, my arm is going to reach over his hip, and I'm just going to do like a big back step here. Okay, so that way there's no effective way for him to reach for my leg. Again, even if he uses the same arm to reach for the opposite leg, this is probably not a good idea for him because now I can start to trap that arm and look for like crucifix and that kind of stuff as well. So it's not in his best interest to use this arm to reach for my cross leg. Okay. So again, here in turtle, he grabs the leg, I sprawl, step my knee behind the tricep, switch my arm to the hip, back step, and circle behind him right away. When you're behind your partner, like we talked about last week, you don't need to be like directly behind them. This is actually further away from getting the hooks in, as opposed to being off to the side. I'm just in a better position to start to like, pull him over and put my hooks in. Okay, so very basic to start. We can use this as a bit of a drill. We can practice side to side too, so both sides. Again, he's here. I'm heavy with my hips, pushing down his head. Left arm is whizzing his arm so he can't just sneak to my back. Once I break the control, my knee dips to the other side of his tricep so he can no longer hook this leg. Again, even if he uses his arm to reach for this leg, yeah, it's not the best thing for him because now I can start to like play with the arm and go for a crucifix. So I wouldn't advise it as the person on bottom. So he grabs the leg, I sprawl, push the head down, pop the control off, dip my knee, hug the hip, back step, and I'm behind him. Okay, very basic. We'll just use this as part of our warm-up. All right, 1, 2. In the back, I just want to give you one option from front headlock if you don't feel comfortable attacking the neck from here. Just one more time to give a little bit more context. I was telling this to a couple groups. It's not wrong to just like run around him with as many steps as you could take, but the problem becomes if I sprawl and break the grip, and then I'm up on my toes and I take a bunch of steps, it's going to stop him from re-grabbing me back on the leg here. So that's why as soon as I break, it's important to step here. Okay, just my knees on the other side of his tricep. Now I know there's no way he can bend his arm in a way that goes back around this leg again. Okay, and if he reaches for the other leg, it's not as big of a deal because he's kind of like at risk with his arm here of crucifix or arm bars and that kind of stuff. So just for some more context. Now, I want to focus on attacking the neck from our headlock scenario. Like I mentioned, it's very similar to a seatbelt in the sense that I want to control under the armpit and over the shoulder. There's a couple different ways to do our guillotine. I prefer to finish without the arm in, but still very possible and very strong to finish with the arm in. The problem becomes if I attack the neck without the arm, then I don't have like a fail-safe. I can only go for the guillotine. There's not many things to transition to. Whereas when I keep the arm in the guillotine, I have more options in terms of transitioning to like an anaconda like we saw on Tuesday, which we'll hopefully go over today as well. So when I'm here, after I've broken the control on the neck, there's a couple different ways to control his neck here. You could literally just chin strap and just control his chin. The value of that, it's hard for him to like turn his head. You have a good sensitivity and good movement over the chin. I usually don't do that, but you could definitely hold the chin until you're ready to commit to your guillotine. When I go for my guillotine, my choking arm, so my right arm over the shoulder, is gonna be shallow. Okay, I'm not shooting that arm deep through like the anaconda. I'm keeping it relatively shallow, and I'll make a fist with my hand so that I'm flexing my wrist, and the bony part of my wrist here is gonna line up right with the Adam's apple in the middle of the neck. Okay, so I'm purposely not feeding my arm deep through here. The deeper I go, then the more like soft, meaty part connects with the neck, and it's not gonna be as effective. So I make my fist here, my hand that's on the other side of the armpit is just gonna cup underneath. So I'm choking and just cupping underneath here, okay? Now, I'm usually pretty aggressive with this in rolling. We don't have to be that aggressive now, but I'm basically gonna shoot my same side of the choking leg, knee to his hip or shin to his hip, so I can throw my left leg over, and I'm purposely gonna sit to the same side of his head. Okay, so I grab the neck, and I pull him into me, shooting. You see how like my shin is lined across his hip. Only my foot is like by the side of his hip, and then now I can throw my left leg over his back. I don't really care like where this arm goes. Sometimes it tucks underneath him, sometimes it goes all the way around my waist. Doesn't really make much of a difference for me. My leg goes over his back, and a couple details. I push my shoulder forward. See how you can't really see the back of his head, as opposed to when I'm relaxed, you can see his neck. So I'm shooting my shoulder forward, and now I'm just gonna sit up and squeeze here, and the tap should be very fast. Okay, I'm doing like this motion, like imagine like I'm like burping myself or stabbing myself in the chest. I'm doing a semicircle, and I'm not leaning back either. When I arch my back, then it actually like straightens his neck, but it's not choking. So I wanna, again, kink the hose, so I'm sitting up, crunching everything in, okay? So again, and the contingency, remembers, I have to make sure he's not holding my legs. The risk, especially the guillotine, if Nabil has especially this side leg, is even if I sit here, he might control my legs enough that he can jump over my legs here. Yeah, you're like this. And then now he's crossbody, and you lose all the tension in your angle for the choke. So especially for my guillotine, I usually won't sit to the guillotine, especially arm in, if he has any control over my leg. So I sprawl first, break the control, then I sit through, so that I'm gonna have more optimal like leg positioning. So again, my front headlock, my choking arm is shallow. It's not super deep here. Okay, I line up the bony part with his Adam's apple. I sit to my hip, throw my leg over. Okay, now this scenario, look where his arm is. It didn't reach around my hip, but that's fine. It shouldn't matter where that arm placement is, as long as I line my right forearm up, nice and shallow on his neck. And then again, from here, I just sit up and squeeze. Okay, so without Nabil, if he wasn't there, literally just here, my shin is blocking his hip. This is going to help us later. If we can't finish the guillotine, it'll open up more space to add our butterfly sweep in. But for now, it just blocks his hip, and then my other leg goes over top of his back. But I'm just doing, again, my semicircle, and I always fall to the same hip of the head control. So if you want to be nice and slow with it, you can like pick your partner up and sit. But usually when I have the neck, I just shoot my knee right through. If it hits his arm or blocks his arm, great, no problem. So again, heavy, chest on his back, making a fist, and I was being lazy when I'm showing it, but ultimately I would be on my toes up until I sit through. Okay, my choking arm is shallow. My assisting arm is just cupping the meat of my pinky side of my hand. I just sit through. My shin finds his hip. Left leg goes over, and now I sit up. And the leg positioning too. This leg stops him from jumping over, and then I'm reinforcing that with this side. Okay, and then it's very easy now to get my finish from here. I just sit up and squeeze. Okay, remember, always sit up, never arching your back. Okay, the more I arch my back, you might get the tap if you're stronger and it kind of hurts the person's neck, but it won't be like a choke. Then you tap them and they'll be like, oh yeah, it was kind of like a crank. And then you'll feel kind of bad for cranking, I guess. All right, let's try this, guys. 1, 2. Do today, but just keep in mind, I mentioned this earlier, and I'll kind of just show you the reasoning behind this now. You can take your arm out and go arm out guillotine. I think that's actually tighter and easier to finish. But again, it's not as versatile in the sense that I don't have like a backup plan. I can't really transition to anything else if it fails. Whereas we kept the arm in, which is nice because now I can transition to different chokes as well. So in a couple scenarios with that arm in, if I was here and I felt I couldn't line up my blade of my forearm with his neck right away, then I don't have to sit. Then this might be a time to switch to the back. Or like we saw on Tuesday, I can pin his arm tight, tuck my head under, gator roll, and start going for our anaconda. Okay, from here we use our knee on top of the tricep, chop through, figure 4 our arms, and start to squeeze from here. But what's nice again about that arming guillotine is even if I do commit to the choke, So I do pull Nabil on top of me, and I feel like I'm here, I'm squeezing, I'm like, oh, it's not lined up as nice as I thought. My foot on the hip can push him away to create space. My leg that was on top can tuck to a butterfly hook. This will be one of the easier butterfly sweeps because his head is broken down, so it's very easy to start to lift him and launch him over. And then same thing, when I'm here, I just switch my hands from choking to gable grip. I try and pinch his elbow. I can use my knee to roll him onto his side, chop, and go back to my anaconda again, okay? So even if we're not hitting the choke, try to come around to everybody. I think for the most part, we're all getting it. But we'll definitely have to look at this another time again. But again, keeping the arm in guillotine will just let you transition to different things. So even if it's not fully there, you still have the butterfly. Or from the headlock before you sit, you can transition to anaconda, or you can spin to the back. So it's a little bit more versatile having the arm in. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're playing around with this and rolling. Grab a quick drink of water, guys. Come back with partners. We're gonna go right away into rolling.